Hi, so this is my digital archive retrospective. So, during my time in humanities core writing, I've learned a lot about world building and the role I play in it, and as well as the role reality plays in it. So, the first digital archive assignment we had was on the Odyssey Book 9, where Odysseus recounts his adventures involving Polyphemus to the Phaeacians. This forced me to think about alternative perspectives and how the stories we hear about are distorted due to biases and how people want to make themselves look better. So I've had to broaden my horizons and think about how my biases affect how I see the world and how I shape the world. In Digital Archive 2, I thought about how my everyday life could be summed up in stories and how those stories reflect my relationships to the world. Because in the Decameron, they told the stories to escape their everyday lives, but also remind themselves of the things they needed in their everyday lives. I thought about the story of my life at UCI, which was somewhat mundane and was very cyclical, but that mundanity is like a part of everyday life where I learn new things, and that's how most people want to live their lives without like thinking about the pain and suffering constantly. But then that brings me to the third fall reflection, which was about Parable of the Sower. You get to this digital archive assignment was enjoyable because I got to connect world building concepts like Afrofuturism, novels, and science fiction to various media and enjoyed. However, even though it's escapism, they still grapple with the harshness of reality. Like in Parable of the Sower, they deal with racism, capitalism, and other things, but they present it in a story like format so it's more digestible and that people will start looking at it because it's in a story. Because if people just are constantly faced with like harsh reality, they're going to ignore it because they want to go back to living their ordinary lives. So they have to, sometimes you have to get creative with how you present this reality and stuff. But even in escapism, underlying societal problems still bleed in. Like, for instance, with the first winter digital archive, which included, which talked about the biases and racism present in museums, because like art is enjoyed as a form of escapism that also informs a lot of people's views about the past and historical narratives. But a lot of the art showcased is racist or has racist elements where black people are sidelined and African American art isn't displayed too often because of racism, which marginalizes black narratives even more. So Professor Cooks brings this up, and she talks about how people are fighting against it by including more African American art or refocusing the narrative, which would hopefully change people's perspectives and make them more aware of the suffering that black people and others go through. The same thing kind of occurs with the Anteater Spirit, also known as the Anteater Activism exhibit in the Langston Library, because like on one hand UCI is honoring all the activists that demonstrated at UCI. However, on the other hand, it feels like a PR move. But it's valid for it to exist because you want people to know their history. You want people to remember what happened. But at the same time, this comes at the cost of like alienating others and downplaying the suffering that and the reasons why these people demonstrated in the first place, because they were demonstrating for their rights and advocating for other people, but they're talked about in extremely demeaning ways, which depending on your background and who you are, you'd view them differently. But it's done this palatable way because people don't like dealing with the harshness of reality, so it has to be toned down in ways they can more easily digest. So then, thinking about this and how like the harshness of reality is there, it made me realize that I want to build a better world, but I also want to bring awareness to like these underlying reality issues, because in order to make this better world, so people will continue to remember all the sacrifices others have made. And that's it for my retrospective. Here's my works cited, and thank you for listening.